We have most of the team, and I'm sure that some more will join. So, Hala, again, thank you so much for being with us. We took you out of your very busy schedule. I know that. Thanks again, and welcome to our meeting and to our quick session. We were hoping that it would be a longer session, but for sure there are limits on time. So everyone, Hala Matar Shufani is the president for the HVS Middle East, Africa, and South Asia, and the managing partner of the HVS Dubai. And I'm sure that 90% of you do not understand exactly what is HVS. Basically, in simple words, HVS is one of the largest independent hospitality consultancy firms in the world, with around 40 offices worldwide. They consult and they support hotels, all kind of hotels, in terms of helping them, directing them into assessing the right opportunities and the right investments in the right place at the right time. Hala is an experienced managing partner and hospitality advisor with a demonstrated history of working in the hospitality industry, skilled in negotiation, feasibility studies, development, recommendation, valuation, financial valuation, asset management, and strategic advisory. She has advised on more than 3,500 hospitality and mixed-use projects in the last 17 years across Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia. She has in-depth expertise in regional hotel markets and a broad exposure to international markets, and maintains excellent contacts with developers, owners, operators, investment institutions, and government entities. Hala speaks frequently at investment conferences, as you may see in the photos that we have collated in here, on a range of topics, including asset valuation, management issues, and women leadership, which is exactly one of the values that we're trying to move around in BD, in terms of versatility and dynamics around gender. Hala completed executive education at Harvard Business School. She also holds an MBA in finance and strategy from IMHI in Cornell in France, and a BA in hospitality management from Notre Dame University in Lebanon. She's fluent in English, French, and Arabic, as most of the Lebanese. She's a board member of the Harvard Business School of the GCC, and is a mother of 3 children, born in Beirut and lived and worked in a number of cities across Europe, Asia, and Middle East, and now currently in UAE. I know Hala personally on a personal level, and when you meet Hala, she simply comes across as, really, from the first time you meet her, as a visionary, a strategist, an entrepreneur, and most importantly, an energizing person who drives and would like to drive projects and commercial excellence in the right way across the region. So thanks, Hala, again for joining us. I'll leave it to you right now. The way we are structuring this discussion is that, as we discussed before, one of our BD values is turning challenges into opportunities. This is one major BD value and BD way to really manage, especially in a region that we deal with, which is Middle East and North Africa. Challenges are across, and it is a challenge that we face every day. That things are changing at economy level or political level or what have you, and recently on the COVID level. It's a big region, it's challenging, and basically we wanted to hear from you on one of our specific challenges as well, how you were able to manage the COVID, especially in an industry like the hospitality industry that was probably one of the most industries affected in the world in general, and in UAE in particular, when it comes to hospitality industry. I know that you've spoken a lot around this in different interviews across different stations, but it would be great to share your thoughts in a summarized manner, and then we can leave it to share their concerns and their questions, and take it from there. I'll leave it to you.
Eli, thank you very much for this intro. I must say, I mean, you left me speechless, really, with all the kind words, but probably, you know, the last few words around who I am when it comes to being a mom, and also somebody, obviously, that has a clear career plan, I like to describe myself. I can look at those pictures and actually I wasn't smiling in any of them, because for those people that know me, they actually know that I am quite energetic and a positive person by nature. So I want to emphasize on this one as we talk through the topic that is very relevant to you, but also has been really disruptive to us in the hospitality industry. So rightly, as you said, perhaps if you allow me to break this down a little bit about me and about also how do I go about the business in general, and how do I find the challenges and potentially the opportunities in those challenges. Maybe talk a little bit about the industry and what has happened and how we have been able to deal with it thus far. And then I would really like to encourage, and I know a few members of your team big questions, so I'm happy along the way either to pause and take those questions, or if they're too technical, let's leave them towards the end of the presentation so I can continue with these topics that are very relevant to me. It's true, I do a lot of talking around the hospitality industry, but I get extremely excited when it is about women leadership, or specifically about motivation, because frankly, and when you spoke to me, Eli, about bringing me in onto this, what do I have to do with the medical world? So for me, that was the curiosity, and this is why I wanted to be here, and hence why I'm here, because I think there's a learning in everything I do. But also more importantly, it's about how do we actually continue to perform every day, knowing that once we beat a challenge, there's going to be another challenge. So let me start off by saying I am not necessarily a believer in beating a challenge. I just think that we have to rise to every opportunity to turn it into a better opportunity. And yes, it has been challenging times. I think everyone has been using words to describe these times as challenging, turbulent, unprecedented. But frankly, it's the time of the year, again, for me, as you can see, the Christmas tree is behind me. It's the time of the year where I do a lot of reflection on a personal level. And I'm sure many of us do it across the year on different occasions. And every time we really reflect on our personal life, let alone our professional life, we realize that we have gone through so many challenges. And you know what? At one point in time, we thought we can't make it, and then we eventually succeeded. And these challenges could be anything from simple as graduating from school and then into university, moving out countries, deciding on marrying, deciding on having children. And each one of those, again, to me, has helped me really build muscles. So as an individual, as Eli said, I'm born in Beirut. I was raised in Beirut up to that point when I was 18, and I decided, you know what? I really need to push myself. I want to challenge myself. And this is where I would describe myself as someone who's actually always looking for the new challenge, regardless if it exists or it's made by me. And that's simply, again, because I personally believe that there's so much out there, and it's really down to us as individuals to take those, I would say, calculated risk. As a financial advisor, I'd like is always a calculated risk, but that we are always looking at how do we do things differently in order for us to evolve. And throughout life, and obviously my experience having arrived initially in Europe, lived in Paris and London, I got very comfortable with my job. So I've been doing what I do for the last 18 years. Sometimes I think this is way too much. It could be perceived as boring, but on the contrary, there hasn't been a single day where I felt I'm doing the same job, because it had to do also with living in so many different countries. So when I decided to leave London and move on to China to set up an office, that was frankly one of the most interesting changes in my life, or challenges. And it wasn't easy. And, again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm always blamed for making everything sound like so simple. And it's not simple. Obviously, along the way, there's a lot of effort that needs to be made, both on an individual level and then also with whoever is concerned, whether the company you work for or the people in your life. But it was very rewarding when I look back at, for instance, my experience in China, and then I realize how much that have allowed me also to develop on a personal level, in the sense of a cultural understanding of differences, but also looking at how different people or different cultures do things differently. We may arrive at the same results, but there is definitely a different way to addressing issues. So from a business context, it also allows us to look at things from a different angle. And then post my job in China, I decided then to move down to the Middle East and set up the Dubai office for HVS, covering the Middle East region. And I remember also too well when I arrived in Dubai in 2007, a lot of my friends, but also industry colleagues that said, you know, Hala, you arrived too late to the UAE. And for those that have been in the UAE for a long time, you know, that was the high of the market, 2007-8. I'm just going to pause and check that you can hear me, Eli, because I can't see anyone, but I'm assuming everyone can hear me.
Yes. We are
all see any more videos, so I just want to make sure I'm not talking to myself. All right, that's fine, perfect. So I was saying, when I arrived in 2007, a lot of people said I came too late to the market. And when I looked at the competition, and that's true at that point in time, we have PwC that have established their hotel division. There was Deloitte and Touche that have established their hotel division. There was Colliers and JLL and many other competitors. And again, having worked for PwC myself and Arthur Andersen, I always knew that they are the big firms. But HVS was the hospitality specialized consulting firm. And if we were able to come into this market, I was extremely confident that this challenge, which seemed like a real challenge at that point in time, let alone that I'm also a female in this market, and let alone that it required a lot of travel to Saudi Arabia. But then again, I mean, to me, very frankly, it was never really a challenge. I don't look at them as challenges. I thought these were real opportunities. And if I can make it work, it's going to be successful. And, you know, when I look back 2007, that's now 14 years. When we arrived, we are very specialized in valuation and consulting and feasibility studies for the hotel assets only, but then the clients wanted mixed-use development. So we decided that we're going to learn more and we're just going to deliver what they want, and we were successful. And fast forward, I look at my competitive market today, and obviously PwC is still there, and Deloitte and Touche are still there, and all these big guys are still there, and they're great companies out there, but they're not doing hospitality anymore. So it wasn't, you know, for me, it wasn't a question of really not coming into the market, but rather finding the opportunity that the market is missing, and it worked, and it worked really well. So that's just in a broader scheme about, you know, when really identifying challenges. But then again, I mean, there are those challenges such as what we're going through at the moment. Very frankly, these are challenges that are beyond just what traditionally we are used to. And again, when I think about the work that we do, a lot of the feasibility studies and valuation really relies on historic trends. And based on the historical performance of these markets, whether globally or in this region, we typically forecast the future, and we forecast how a property will perform. The trouble now, we cannot rely on the historic data at all. So we've spent money, time, energy in collecting all this data. We have a database at HBS of 50 years of P&L for every single hotel asset in the world. And to a great extent, we're finding ourselves now with a situation that that's great data, but how relevant is it going to be going forward? Can we use it as an indicator? And the truth is we can use some of it, but we're going to have to use much more our mind and our own perception of where things will be moving. So it's not going to be so much the data, it's going to be much more about really assessing the future. This is where the bigger challenge lies for the hospitality industry. So just in a few numbers, and I don't want to bore you with a lot of numbers, but the truth of the matter, the hospitality, and when we talk hospitality, travel and tourism, it accounts to approximately 10% of global GDP. Some countries or cities or markets, whichever way you want to look at it, this is 5% of total GDP, such as Saudi Arabia, and they're hoping to push that all the way up to 15% and become less dependent on the oil industry. Obviously, that's their 2030 vision plan. But then you look at Seychelles, and you look at Mauritius, and you look at many other markets globally, and tourism, travel and tourism is close to 30% of their GDP. What that means also is that for every 10 jobs in the industry, 1 job is in the travel and tourism industry. So then you obviously can estimate how much the loss and damage is. A couple of months ago, and that is back, if I remember right, in May, we contacted all our clients that own most of the hotels, let's say 90% of the branded hotels in the Middle East region, to find out that 60% of those hotels have been closed down, shut down permanently. So you take an average of 200 employees per hotel, and that tells you how many people were left jobless. We take these number of keys and multiply it by the typical revenue per key, and that would actually tell us how much the industry has lost. There has been very good stories out there meanwhile. I mean, there are certain hotels that performed extremely well. On the other hand, these were the hotels that were either in a remote location, they were resort, they have put the facility towards quarantine facilities or have become the place for people to go and self-quarantine. So these are the exceptions, but generally speaking, there has been a lot of disruption and a lot of losses. And I also remember back in April, the very first event or conference, virtual conference, and they've asked me to do some recovery forecast. And I said, in my opinion, based on the very little we knew back in April, frankly, but just understanding this dynamic of the industry, it is unlikely we're going to recover anytime before 24 or 25. And frankly, that day, the amount of people that wrote me a message or sent me a text or called me to actually say, Hala, since when you are a negative person, you're so pessimistic, you're being so negative, why are you saying that? I mean, everyone is hoping that this is going to be behind us, right? And the truth is, I wasn't being neither pessimistic nor negative. I wish this never happened. But the reality, if we read into the impact of that, we should accept and assess realistically the situation in order to prepare to transform, whether that challenge into an opportunity or to make the decisions of moving on. And then fast forward, within a couple of months, you had the CEO of Qatar Airways, you had the CEO of Emirates, the WTTC, and everyone else basically saying it's going to be 24, 25. And recently there is 27 being the recovery for the hospitality industry. So again, the point is not to make it look very negative, but the point is to say that we have a real and serious trouble this industry is facing. And there is a lot of efforts now being done between obviously the private and the government and the governments amongst each other to really see how we can work this out. Because even, and you in the medical world, you obviously know more than me, but even with the vaccines and the great news that is coming out, this is definitely going to help accelerate the recovery. And certain markets, let's say Dubai will host the Expo 2020, that's going to help. Saudi Arabia has major plans that might help, and so will in Qatar. But generally speaking, if we're talking about the resumption of travel at the pace that it was in the past and what that will mean for hotel bookings and as a result spending within the industry, that will take a longer time. And without getting too technical, but the fact that any company has already been bleeding during the last couple of months. So the travel budgets have been minimized. So if you think about travel budgets at your company having been minimized, so instead of doing 100 trips, you might do 20. And as a result, there will be less. But again, I think today where we have seen a lot of successful, I wouldn't call it even successful, but those that have succeeded better are clients that we have worked with couple of years ago to basically say the hospitality industry has been disrupted on a number of occasions. I mean, historically, we've had a lot of incidents, be it related to terrorism or be it related to natural disaster, which suddenly you find your hotel empty. Examples of that could be Egypt or elsewhere in Africa, or even in Asia to a large extent when it comes to natural disasters. But then it does spike up rather quickly, people forget, and suddenly the flights are coming in and you've got your bookings and the world is perfect again. Then in that industry as well, there has been a lot of disruption when it comes to Airbnb, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. I think Booking.com, booking platforms, and the Airbnb has been the largest disruptors to the hotel industry. With that, I must say, and please don't quote me, we have been a very slow industry to react. We have been very arrogant to say, you know what, I'm the Marriott of the world and I'm the Intercon of the world and nothing is going to disrupt me. And that's not true, because you know and we know there are disruptors, and Karim came and disrupted the local travel mode, and the likes of Booking.com came and disrupted the booking system, and Alibaba and Amazon disrupted the world, whether we like it or not, right? And we've been telling clients for the last 2 to 3 years, there is a change. Now, we never anticipated this is going to be the fundamental change, very frankly. But for those clients that started to believe that hospitality assets cannot be just beds and rooms and people into the room, but rather we need to create more of a mixed-use development, more of a communal space, and bringing in the different elements. These are the ones that today are actually doing much better because they have taken the trends and the opportunities. And what this basically really tells us is that with time, these disruptors are only pushing us towards evolving and really tapping into opportunities that have great potential and leaving behind those that are dying. And again, I'm sure you're all very familiar. There will be companies that die out. I mean, if you look at the examples of some of the bigger companies we were very familiar with 10 and 15 years ago, including Nokia and IBM and many others. I mean, if we start listing them, they weren't able really to transform. So for me, I mean, again, because you started, Eli, with the word challenge, and I like to break down challenge into making sense of what challenge is. For me, the fundamentals of challenge is you first rise to it. It cannot beat you, right? I mean, if it beats you, then you're not dealing with it. And then it has to do with evolving and transforming. And part of this and how our industry is dealing with it and how at HVS we're dealing with it is what we are exploring. So if I can relate to a very specific example, one of our core services is valuation. This is what we do for a living. Every year we value hotels. If we were to value hotels today, the values would be 50% lower. And no one wants to hear that. No one wants to know that their property is 50% lower. So guess what? Neither do I, frankly, want to break the news, nor the banks, nor the owners are interested in knowing. So there is this sort of agreement that, you know what, let's not talk about it this year. Let's come back next year and talk about it, which is fine. But what does that leave me with? No work, right? So it's not great because they don't do valuation. So we're exploring now that, you know what, those owners that actually don't want the value, what they need is somebody to tell them whether they should stay open, whether they should close, whether they should convert. So I actually went out and hired someone. When everyone else is letting people go, I hired someone. And I know that didn't necessarily initially fly well with the team because, I mean, needless to say, we've all been on pay cuts, right? I mean, it's been difficult times. But the truth of the matter, if I don't do anything, I'm dying or I'm losing out. And this is where sometimes we really have to basically say, it's challenging, it's tough. But if I cannot continue with what I'm doing today, what is that new thing that we will do? So I actually went out, I hired someone that could support me in that space, and we've pitched it. And now we're doing more there. And we have services that have gone quiet, right? Just like if I think, for example, from a geographic perspective, I joke about it in the company. Initially, when I arrived in Dubai, I was managing partner of Dubai for the Middle East. And then I was promoted to the regional president for Middle East and Africa. And then I became the president of Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. And I used to tell them, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I mean, you know, in a way, it's great. You have such a huge region. But the truth of the matter, I mean, you look at my region, there's 150 countries and I can do business in 10 countries. Really? I mean, you're just making it harder for me. I have to prove myself harder compared to the guy in the US. But, you know, c'est la vie, we say, and you all know that. I mean, one point we were doing work in Iraq, suddenly we can't do work in Iraq. We were in Syria, we couldn't be in Syria. We are here, we can't be there. We were in Qatar, then we cannot travel to Qatar. And these are story, you know what I say, story of my life. And hence why, you know what, I don't think about it. I just move forward. There is an opportunity, I'm killing it. There is a challenge, I'm gonna deal with it. And also along the way, just to be fair, there are some challenges that are there. We're gonna just have to accept them. We cannot necessarily, and that's I mean, I may be wrong, but frankly, I've decided in my life there are certain battles I won't fight because I want my energy somewhere else. So I hope I don't wanna really take up all the time because I would love to hear from everyone, but I hope I've kind of
this is excellent because you were able to talk somewhere, somehow indirectly with our strategy in the Middle East and North Africa, which is, I mean, we have a big region as well, not as big as yours, but we really have big challenges in managing those countries in general because of access, because of presence, and now because of the COVID. So focus is our strategy, and basically this is exactly where we have 4 major countries that we're going to focus on, and not forgetting the rest, but proactively we're going to push, we're going to plan, we're going to promote, we're going to do all the marketing, the professional education activities specifically in those countries. So you were talking to us indirectly on what you were referring to, so, or what you're doing. So.
And I mean, obviously, you know, you're definitely a much better performing sector than we are at the moment. There has been times perhaps where we were performing better than others.
Yeah.
But you know, when it comes
challenges.
But when it comes to these challenges, I think they are universal, especially for us in this part of the world. What you're facing today, we're facing. Yes, you may be able to navigate better, simply because you know, it does seem that your services are more required, but these are constraints that we try our best to deal with them. But there is as much that we can do. With that said, I think, you know, for me, it's always been very frankly, you know, that's what resonates the most with me, is that in order to beat any challenge is to have this positive and growth mindset. You know, you can have a positive mindset, but it doesn't necessarily be a growth mindset. So for me, it is not just being positive, but it's growth is basically 100%. we need to grow, and it's important as a foundation. For me, this is the foundation, really, to have that mindset of growth.
100%. And it's a mindset that can be built, that can be always on the go if it was really directed in the right path. So thanks a lot, Hala. Probably, as we said before, we would like to leave some good time for questions and answers. So I'll leave it now to the team to ask you some of the questions that they have in mind, and then probably I'll ask you some question if there were any time left.
I see Jad once he's raising his hand. Hi, Jad.
Yes, hi, hello everyone. I will open my camera. So it's great to hear the testimonial of a successful person like yourself, especially with all the challenges and standing among the elite of hospitality and consultancy. My question is related mainly to Saudi Arabia, because I know that the project they have to grow the tourism business, also the internal tourism and the external one. So you said they are looking to increase 5% their GDP from 10 to 15. And if I do a simple calculation, the 5% is, we're talking a huge number of billions. So don't you think this can compensate the drop of business in the whole region if we just focus there? And because they don't have to wait for the COVID to resolve, they can just start building, preparing themselves for the coming years.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, now the question is whether I believe, you know, that their vision is achievable in that time. That's a different conversation. At the moment, their tourism is 5% and they're looking to grow to 15. Now that could take a good 20, 30 years. One thing for sure, and that I can judge by the business we are doing at the moment, historically 50% of our business came from Saudi Arabia. As we speak today, 80% of everything in the office is in Saudi Arabia. So they're definitely pushing forward with their plans. I think what Saudi Arabia also realized, and something we've been for long arguing, that there is such a huge domestic tourism that remains untapped. Why don't you tap into it first and then go and promote to the world Saudi Arabia? I think with this lockdown, and one of the reasons perhaps not opening the travel corridor between Saudi Arabia and the rest of the GCC is specifically to contain, and that's my own theory. There may be a lot of truth in it or no truth whatsoever, but that's my theory, is because they wanted to have domestic tourism and they were extremely successful at that. So with that, now they can build on their international, obviously, exposure. They have aggressive plans. And yes, for any sector, not just the hospitality, for any sector, the size and scale of the market, just like as Egypt, these are huge markets. So, you know, you need Saudi Arabia to replace 3 other small markets. But in terms of your geographic presence, you also want to be ideally in every market. My personal view is that there is a huge potential for growth in the hospitality sector in Saudi Arabia and other sectors. My only concern, however, is that there has been, just like any other country, there has been a heavy bill to contain and manage the COVID. So as a result of that, how is that going to be passed back to investors, to the individuals, to the expats, to the employees? there's going to be a cost element there, and just fine tuning is where the government will need to make sure that, you know, on the other hand, you've got the oil price that has been a big hit as well. So they have a few bills to pick up, but they seem to be definitely moving forward with their projects. And I can I can testify to that because we're involved in a lot of their projects as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hala. If I may go next, thank you for your input. This is Abdo. I want to try to relate a little bit between your business and our business, and I think I'm going to ask a general question. In our company, we believe in 3 purposes: the leadership, mindset, and value. And you already spoke about the mindset specifically. So, for example, if I want to tell you these 3 purposes, can you give us how, as HVS, like with your clients, how were you able to lead them, to put a mindset in them and to give them a value? So if you can give me like 1-2 words for each of these 3 purposes.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I mean, in my notes as well, I've got the values. Values are very important, and sticking to values is extremely important, especially during a downturn. Again, you know, when we look at companies, those that have been successful are those that had a very strong value system between their employees, but also with their clients, right? So over time, historically, and I think very frankly, this is what is continuing to give us an edge in the market, despite really going through a very difficult 6 months, not just the hotel industry. Now I'm talking about HVS as a company. Yeah, it was very challenging, right? There was a point in time. When I spoke to clients, I said, I don't want the business. I just want you to know I'm a call away. So if you just want to pick my brain, you pick my brain. And that was it for 4 months. All I did with clients, calls, free of charge, just chatting. It was great, because all they needed to do is talk, is to let it out, and they're bleeding. And even today, and again, perhaps because a lot of our clients are repeat, keeping in mind 70% of my client base is repeat client and referrals. You develop that relationship, right? So it is in our value is to actually work with our partners, we call them, rather than clients, because they become partners. So I think what has been really very important for them is the fact that we were just there. And we're ready when they're ready. And that's what I keep telling them. We're ready to assist when you're ready. But meanwhile, I'm only a call away. And this has been good. I think in terms of leadership, that's an interesting one as well, because it takes a lot also to lead the people during these difficult times, right? And motivating them and keeping them engaged. And it's not easy. And the very first, I think, 6 weeks were very tough, even to me as a leader, right? Because you're going through that, trying to understand, making sense of the word, and then trying to develop that strategy that you're safeguarding your people, you're safeguarding your partners, because this is the most important to me initially, and then safeguarding the shareholders. And it's not easy. But then I also believe that it starts from the very early days. At HVS, we hire employees that share very similar values to our company. And when you have that sort of culture, then it becomes much easier for them, even if they're upset. I mean, there were times when we were all upset. I'm not going to lie to you. They were unhappy. And maybe today they're still a little bit unhappy, but they're not too unhappy. You know, that's a little bit unhappy. But we really managed to pull through because we have a very similar value system. And for us, values are extremely important. And actually, we even put them into our proposals. The clients see what the values of HVS are. And we tell them, just like you sign the service, you have to sign to our values, that you share very similar values. So I honestly think those 3 go hand in hand. Perhaps, I think values and mindset, and then you find the leader, right? Because then this leader has to really believe in the values and have that mindset of growth, if this is what you're looking for. I hope that addressed it.
No, yes, definitely. And you actually indirectly, you're talking about our company and what we did exactly. Even during these times, we did the same thing. We were just a call or a message away from our doctors, from our partners. So we did the same things when it came to value. And I'm glad you said that. So thank you for this, for your answer.
And really, people really appreciate it. Especially when you know, I mean, I don't know your relationship with the doctors, but I can tell you I've got clients that, you know, using the word bleeding is very little, because I know they cannot meet their obligations. The hotel industry was already struggling in 2019. So we went into 2020. So there was a lot of sad stories out there. So also helping them troubleshoot and navigate it. But, you know, you've got to do it.
Yeah, true. Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Hello, Hala. If you allow me to be the next one. So my name is Muhammad, and thank you so much for your fruitful discussion. And you mentioned earlier that some of the chain of hotel survived and opened their facility, and some of the chain closed due COVID crisis. From your point of view, how do you see the chain of the hotels that keep the business going did differently than the others? Or how did they manage the crisis differently to keep their business going from your point of view?
To be honest with you, there are certain fundamentals that those hotels that remained open and successful needed to have, such as location. I'll be very honest with you. So whether it's Ras Al Khaimah hotels that did exceptionally well during the initial lockdown, or whether some resort hotels in Abu Dhabi, or even some resort hotels in Dubai. This, on account of their location, people have chosen just to go and check in for 10 days, for 2 weeks, and they did extremely well. The ones that were worst hit, and the 60% that I was referring to, were predominantly those that have a very heavy focus on corporate and MICE business. And this is a sector that is not traveling, full stop. Yes, maybe some local demand, but there was a point in time that we, if you remember well, we used to even have to apply to leave the house for 1 hour. Offices were closed. And I think this is when most of these hotels actually closed down. The decision to reopen now is going to be critical, because if you are predominantly a corporate hotel, then the question is, can you quantify the return of corporate demand? And if the return is going to be half of what you used to have, and especially say in Dubai, there is always a new supply coming into the market, what do you do with the remaining? Some of those hotels actually that remained open, they had different arrangements in place, either city staycation, and they managed to occupy the place. Now, we're not talking about profitability here, because one thing is to be profitable at the bottom line, but one thing is just to keep your employees right and engage them. The others have also offered these rooms as day-use offices, and they have been also quite popular in certain instances, especially in neighborhoods where you have enough traffic. And for others, it was a choice of converting also from short stay into a longer stay. Now, personally, my view is that moving forward, again, hotel owners and that industry will have to evolve beyond, because if you have too much additional supply, these hotels are designed in a way unlike retail, or unlike office, or unlike residential, where all you need to do is strip down a wall and then you can have a bigger space. When you design a hotel, and that's what we tell our clients, you have to be very confident that you are addressing 10, 15 years down the road. You cannot change your mind, right? All your MPP, all your works, and all these heavy structures. Now, I don't want to give tips to everyone on this call, but again, if I had hotels and I'm struggling, there are some straightforward concepts that I think are needed in this part of the world and could be popular. And one example that comes to mind is an elderly home. You know, if we look at elderly homes in this part of the world, they're not very well established. And if they were established, then these elderly homes are not necessarily where we would accept culturally to leave our parents. But if we have a hotel that suddenly becomes an elderly home, great facility, where these people will be looked after, or a smaller hotel, then this is potentially a good use. Or a medical facility. Don't build a hospital, come use this. I mean, there will be owners that will have to make this tough decision, because their real estate will suffer and suffer for a long time, or will be reacquired by the bank, and not every project will be saved. But then on the other hand, there are also some concepts. There is conversion of space that could be considered, but then it will be subject also to being able really to move around within that building structure.
Thank you so much.
Hala, thank you so much. I would like to ask my initial question was the same question of Sharqawi, but since our responsibility is across MENA, I would like, a highlight from your good self. What is the major affected region or country within MENA that have negatively impacted by COVID-19? I don't like to go country by country, but because we are focusing on a certain focus countries like in Arab Peninsula, UAE. So if I say that Saudi, UAE, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, and Morocco, which country are have the massive negative effect on hospitality business, and in what percentage? And do you think that could be recovered, especially for the related criteria of such of these countries?
It's a tough question in the sense that every country, I personally believe every country has been affected. Now, yes, maybe some worse because they are so dependent. Definitely Jordan and Lebanon, for example, I'd say they're worse hit simply because they're not as diversified as Saudi Arabia. They're not as diversified as elsewhere, right? But on the other hand, Egypt, for example, they seem to be getting on. They seem to have similar consumption. Yes, they are impacted to some extent, but they don't seem to be as impacted. So it's difficult to say that is worse impacted because, and what I'm trying really to think through the question you asked, really to make sense of it. If I was to say, for example, Lebanon is worst impacted, but then Lebanon doesn't have the same inventory as Dubai. So when it comes to recovery, Lebanon might recover faster, not necessarily faster, but you have less losses as per se than Dubai. So I'm not sure I would be able to address it from who is impacted more negatively. But what I can definitely say is that the recovery is likely to be in certain countries ahead of other. And simply those countries because they benefit from the ability either from promoting tourism or promoting foreign direct investments or promoting some sort of additional investments that will help trigger the economy. And these countries would be Saudi Arabia, and then is likely to be the UAE, to some extent Qatar. For example, again, keeping COVID aside, I'm not sure what your experience has been in Qatar, but what I can tell you for a fact that despite 3 or 4 years ago, I can't even remember the dates anymore now, when they've decided to stop travel between Qatar and the UAE and Saudi Arabia, there was a general consensus that the hospitality market is going to be hit so badly in Qatar and they will never recover. The truth of the matter, it took them 2 to 3 months to replace every travel from the GCC with travel from Iran, with travel from China, with travel. So at the end of the day, over the last 3 years, every time I looked at hotel performance, Doha was doing as good or as bad as Riyadh and Dubai. It wasn't doing any worse or any better. And so this is, again, when we talk about challenges, yeah, it was a big challenge for them, but then they managed. So I think simply because it's the GCC and they benefit from deeper pockets, it would be fair to assume that they have the ability to support better the recovery than other countries. Does that somehow answer it? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, because our countries like Lebanon and Jordan are mainly depending on the tourism, and most of the economy is coming from that source. So this is why I'm trying to understand how, in your vision, how these countries could mitigate. I know that Saudi and UAE is having other funds and other resources to support their losses, but our countries, being poor countries with limited resources, along with let's say Morocco, we will be mainly or heavily impacted by COVID-19, and we could take more time to recover. So that's it. In a percentage, that could be ranging from 70 to 80 or less than for the heavily impacted. I mean, for Jordan and Lebanon and Morocco, for example.
You mean 70% of what, say, the Saudis do?
Losses, 70% of losses.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I would probably say, let me put it differently. I would say the regional loss in the hospitality sector is estimated to be 50%. Okay, okay, say in 2020 versus 2019, some of which will be 70%. And yes, maybe you're right. These would be the markets where we would have seen the worst decline. And then other markets a bit more established would be at 30%. So that would be for us, the regional average would be around 50%.
Fair. Thank you so much, Hala. Much appreciated.
Hi, Hala.
Last question.
Please, if you don't mind, Eli. Hi, Hala. You
Hi,
can hear me clearly?
I can.
Okay, it's nice to have you in such meeting. Allow me to ask one last. I'm lucky enough to have the last question, but regarding the future, how do you expect the hospitality and tourism industry will it change after COVID pandemic, and when?
See, I definitely think that we will always travel. I mean, you know, despite all that we've been talking about, and despite the pessimism, and whether we agree that it's 24 the recovery or the 27, the truth of the matter, we're going to travel again. And we're going to travel in a very similar way. We're going to still travel by airlines, but although you might have more of easier transportation, but that's something that was in the making anyway, whether in the GCC to connect the GCC or elsewhere. So people will travel. It's a matter of timing. We've seen a lot of people travel across the UK this summer, across the US this summer, and as I said, across Saudi Arabia. So that is established. The recovery is where it's going to be trickier. For those that will have deeper pockets are those that will last longer, in my personal opinion, because it's going to require a lot of financial commitment. And again, you know, for example, when we look at what the governments have done, you know, to a great extent, it was helpful, but it was helpful only for a very limited period of time. It was helpful for 2 to 3 months. Within the hospitality industry, this is a 12-month bleed, no matter which way you recover. In terms of the future of hospitality, that's what I said last year, and I will only repeat that now, is that the traveler preferences have changed. So they're looking for more of an experience. They're looking for really that lifestyle and well-being. I suspect there will be much more in wellness, much more in medical retreats, much more in looking after ourselves, and much more in being in nature. So I would encourage developers and owners really to look at those sort of experiences, because people will travel less for work. They will have now more time to travel on personal and leisure events, and therefore there will be much more pickup in those type of adventurous ecotourism, wellness, and that space, which is great. And this way we would be also looking after the well-being of the human being, right? So it's not just about being so much focused on the corporate world.
This is true. This is true.
Thank you, Hala.
Nadine, you had a question. I'm not sure if you still have it or it has already been answered.
Yes, actually, I still have it, but I was afraid we're running out of time.
Hala, are you free for one more question and then we close?
Can you?
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
Okay, thank you, Hala. It's a pleasure having you with us, definitely. I have a question. Being in the Middle East, with the mentality of the Middle East society, having a woman that's successful in her career and reaching such a leadership position, what challenges did you face and how did you overcome them?
Nadine, can you open your camera, please?
Yeah, I was going to say, Nadine, I'd like to talk to you if you're able to put on your camera. And that's it's a great question. And actually last week I was on a panel in Saudi Arabia talking about women leadership in this region. And that was the same first opening question. And I'm just going to answer it the way I answered it there. I'm not trying to make it sound simple, but to me, it was not really a challenge, perhaps because I never bothered too much by what they think. It was more about me, actually. I know I'm going to be able to make it, and I'm going to make it. Yes, it takes a lot of proving yourself, for sure. But it started off not necessarily in the Middle East. So when I look at my experience, I remember when I worked in London and across Europe, I used to have a lot of the Westerners saying, "Where's the gray hair?" I was in my 20s then. Right? I think that offended me even more, right? Because, you know, they wanted the more experience. But now when I look back at it, they're right. I mean, as a financial advisor, it's all about the experience you accumulate along the way. In China was a very different experience. And that, I must say, of all my experiences, the China experience was the most challenging when it comes to women. And you really need to understand there is a big cultural difference. So when I to answer your question, when I arrived in the Middle East, actually, that was a treat for me. But nevertheless, I think it is challenging when it comes to actually pursuing the career, which I didn't compromise on, but also, as Eli first introduced me, I'm a mom of 3, and also making sure you're looking after the family. There's a lot of society issues, right? But I decided not to bother with any of them. I just decided that, you know, it's a personal decision. Perhaps I should also say that I'm born into a family of 4 girls. We don't have any brothers, and mom and dad believed in us so much that, you know, we were brought up, and this is very important. And I don't say that just because I want to give credit to my parents. It's because I want to say to every woman out there, you really need that support from the family as your backbone. If your family believes in you, then you can fight the world. So it comes from the family, and then it comes from your partner, if you decide to have a partner in life. And then it really becomes also extremely important, the company you work for. And with that question, I want to also just tie in to what we, you know, this topic was that for these challenges to become less of a challenge, you always need that infrastructure that I always call it. You need it in yourself, that motivation to succeed, and that you have that positive mindset. You need it in your circle, whether they're close friends or your industry colleagues. And more importantly, you need it in that company that also believes in a similar way. I mean, if you have a growth mindset and you work in a company that is very traditional and they don't want to change, then you're obviously, you know, there's a clash. So for me also, I keep telling women, choose your companies. Choose those companies that believe in women. Choose those companies that give equal opportunities to women. And it's okay to not to work for a company because they don't necessarily share your values. And I think with time, frankly, when I compared 13 years ago, the very first event or events I attended, there were no females. I used to walk into a room of 500 male. I mean, and it is intimidating. You know, you're just having to, but now it's not a problem anymore. Now it's great because I see a lot of women, and that's amazing. And it really excites me to see that there's much more women. But I think it's extremely important that you get this support, but not to think of them, Nadine, if I can say, and I'm addressing you particularly because these challenges, we have been told to think they are a challenge. That's my own view. These are misconceptions. You know, we're worrying too much about what the world thinks. Well, you know what? I'm busy doing a career, or I'm busy having children. And that's what I tell people. So you just have to make it through, and you know, you prove yourself just like everyone else. And at the end of the day, I think the whole world is moving into diversity, and that's an inclusion, and there is much more support, and there is more acceptance to that. And there will be those occasions, just to wrap up on this one, I've had 2 clients, very frankly, that said to me, Hala, we would love to work with you. We know you will add value, but you know what? Our board doesn't want us to work with females. And that's okay. It didn't even hurt. I respect that. You know, it's perfectly fine because it's a choice, right? As long as I know that this is the choice they've made. So I work also for a company that 50% of our senior people from the 80s are female. So to me, this probably also helps the fact that I never really sensed it was a challenge, because it was suddenly from day one, this is how we are and who we are. But I think the times have changed, and there is much more opportunity really to allow women to shine, and women can do it for sure.
Thank you, Hala. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nadine.
Very nice question, Nadine. And you brought up every single passion in reply from Hala.
Right? That's when I cannot keep calm anymore.
She was not only replying verbally, she was using all the body language.
And also, she was recalling all the spaces that she has been through in her life. Thank you so much, Hala.
So you brought a very nice closing note. Hala, it was really a beautiful discussion. I really personally loved it a lot. It was really energizing, I believe, to the team, to everybody who has been asking questions as well. Thanks everyone for your questions. Most importantly, thank you, Hala, for your presence with us. I know that we took you out of a very busy schedule, a very busy day, and I really appreciate it and appreciate your presence with us.
Thank you for having me.
I hope at some point in time you will be able to meet our team face to face, probably at in one of the hotels.
Get together, invite me. I'll come.
No, we will. And have a nice evening.
Thank you, and to everyone as well.
Thanks.
Keep well.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Hala.
Thank you, Hala. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Hala. Thank you, Eli.
Thanks.
Thank you, Hala.
Thank you, Hala.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Hala, so much.
Thank
Pleasure. Eli, I'm good to leave?
Yes, you are. Thanks a lot.
Super. Thank you.